Welcome to the Puzzle of Us podcast, where we are helping you pick up the broken pieces of life, love, and marriage and help you to feel whole again. I'm your host, Chelsea Peterson, clinical and owner of Cache Valley Counseling, and I've been doing this work for actually almost over 15 years now, and I have lots of experience as a marriage and family therapist working with all sorts of individuals, families, couples, and I want to bring some of my expertise to you. So hopefully you enjoy this podcast and learning a little bit from me. Today, our podcast is about building trust, strategies for honesty, communication, and connection in your relationship. And I want to talk a little bit about, I'm sure you've all heard about the importance of honesty, right? The importance of trust, that trust is the foundation of any relationship. And I could not agree more. Part of having a good relationship or a safe, secure relationship is feeling like there's security and safety. And part of security and safety is that foundation of trust. If I trust my partner, what is trust? Trust is that feeling you get when someone shows up consistently for you. Consistent in their behaviors, consistent in how they're, showing up, approaching you. That is the feeling that you get is trust. And if I don't have that in my relationship, there isn't safety in our relationship. We see more conflict happen. We see, lots of room for things like addictions, things like affairs, things like spending more time at work or hobbies or other things than spending time together in your relationship. Quality time becomes harder. So again, yes, on the foundation, trust is on the bottom of that. So yes, it is vital and important for every successful relationship. But it is hard to maintain. And it is sometimes difficult to create. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how. How does one gain trust? What does that look like? How do I help foster that feeling in myself and in my partner of showing up consistently? So what does that mean? And then we're also going to talk about how to, just very briefly, how to fix trust or rebuild trust if it has been lost or broken in your relationship. So we've got a lot to cover, so we're going to hit the ground running. Here we go. One of the things that the best way to have trust or build trust in your relationship is how you are showing up in your behaviors. Behaviors showing up, what I mean by that specifically is being responsive, being engaged, and being accessible. So Sue Johnson asks the question, are you there for me? A-R-E. Are you accessible? Are you responsive? Are you engaged? Accessible being, do you show up for your partner? When your partner is in need, do I show up for you? Do you show up for me? If the answer is yes, check that box. You're doing a great job. You are on track for having trust in your relationship. Is my partner responsive? Do they show up, but they're on their phone, or they're more engaged in what they've got going on, and they don't really care about what I've got going on? If that's the case, that's not being responsive, right? Engaged. Do they not care? Do they care about what's happening, right? And you can tell if someone is engaged, if they're interested, if they're asking questions, if they are maybe not even asking questions, but turn and their body language is open and they're looking at you, and there's just a feel of someone being engaged in the conversation, right? So the best way, if you can remember the acronym are you there for me? A-R-E. Are you accessible? Are you responsive? And are you engaged with your partner? When they need you, when they need support, when they're going through something, or when, they've even had a bad day or maybe had a great day, are you accessible, responsive, and engaged? Those are the best ways that you can continue to build trust, that you build it and you maintain it in your relationship. The other things I would add would be be consistent. If I show up and if I show up and am responsive, open, accessible, engaged for one time a year, be confused. They're not going to trust me. They're not going to be able to uh, put trust in faith in me. I may not be accountable or take ownership for those things that I need to. And that is all a part of, again, being accessible, responsive, and engaged is part of the being consistent and being committed. And that's not just, oh, I'm going to show up for you this one time, but I'm going to continue to keep showing up for you. Along with that is when you do show up and you're responsive and you're engaged, it's not just about being there for your partner. Primarily, yes, it is if they're going through something, but sometimes it then becomes about you being vulnerable with them. Maybe picking a time where I'm able to say, hey, I'm really struggling with this right now, whatever this might be, right? I'm really struggling with a value right now, or I'm really struggling with work right now, or a work relationship, or what do I do about this? And part of that is being vulnerable and being willing to share that with your partner so that they can also show up for you. Now, this is just as hard, and if not harder for most people, to say, hey, I'm struggling, because we want to show up. We want to be that person. We want to be that thing for our partner. And we want to be able to be Superman and do it all, right? And for the most part, we feel more connected and more known and more like we matter and like we have support and we're a team when we share in struggles that we're going through. If we, try to be Superman, or we try to take it on, and I can do all of this, or I can be super mom and I can work 40 hours and I can do all the things at home and I don't ever need anything. Sometimes that can be, if you can do that, great, but it can be incredibly isolating, very help make you feel alone, and doesn't help create teamwork and partnership in your relationship. Doesn't help create trust, right? So part of that is not only showing up. It's much easier for most of us to show up for other people, right? I often use the phrase, our eyes point outward for a reason. It's easier to look outward and see what's around us than it is to look inside and see what we might need. So it's with that same need, it's easier sometimes to show up for other people. Yeah, I can be there for you when you're going through a hard time, but sometimes it's difficult for me to ask for help when it feels so good when we show up for other people. For many, many people, it feels very a sense of purpose. It feels great when we can show up for other people. But when we need to ask for help, how do we do that? How do we get vulnerable, and how do we share that with other people? So making sure that that's a two-way street that's happening in your relationship is really important for creating trust in your relationship. Just a couple other things of how trust is built is respect, warmth, non-judgmental, and prioritize your time together. Again, you can't build trust, you can't maintain trust if we don't ever see each other, because our lives are so busy and we're headed in different directions. So prioritizing time for your relationship is really important. But when you are together and you are spending that time, doing so in a respectful, warm, non-judgmental way, right? You don't do something and then have your partner look at you and say, why the heck did you do that? Or why it doesn't feel good. I don't want to be around someone who feels like when I'm being critiqued or when I'm being attacked. And so making sure that you are providing that for them as well. Now, what do you do, or how do you rebuild trust if trust has been broken? Trust gets broken all the time in relationships for various things. It can be big things like affairs or addictions, or a sort of breaking of values that I thought we were doing together, or I thought we were on we were headed in the same direction, and I found out this about you, right? You stole something from the grocery store. Not saying that that is happening, but maybe you're laundering money or whatever. There's things like that that happen. Um, and so sometimes those can be pretty big trust breakers and pretty big rupture moments for connection in the relationship. There are big things like that. And there can also be things like maybe I really lose my temper one day and I didn't know my partner could lose their temper that bad. And I get scared or, things like that, that it's nothing super egregious, nothing that completely breaks trust, but there is some repair that maybe needs to be done there. And so anything, again, we're talking about this works for any of those small things, big things. But one of the things that is most important is that everything must be out in the open. I've worked with several couples who, I'll just use the example of an affair because that unfortunately happens far too often in relationships. An affair has happened. And because an affair has happened, there's a lot of, lack of trust. And the person who typically has been having the affair, is usually like, oh, it's just a one-time thing, or they try and downplay it, right? Because they see how crushing or how hurtful it is to their partner. And it can be completely devastating. And so for many, many reasons, people lie. I don't think they're doing it because they're terrible people, but it's really hard to kind of own up to something when you know it's causing hurt or harm to someone else, particularly someone you love. And so people lie for all sorts of reasons. But what I have seen happen is that they say, oh, it was only a one-time thing, or, oh, it was only I only did it one time, or I only viewed pornography in this one phase, or whatever. But then it comes out that there was other things, or there was other partners, or there was multiple times, or there were details that as we get going down the line or down the road, or stories start to come out, that more hurt is then done because they're starting to rebuild trust. And just as they're starting to rebuild trust, it's like someone pulling the rug out from underneath them all over again. And so if something like this has happened, the best advice I could give you is get everything out in the open from the start, because you cannot really start to repair and build a solid foundation of trust if everything has not been put out there. So I know it's hard. I know it's difficult. I know for many reasons it feels better to justify why I'm not putting it out there than it is just to rip the Band-Aid off and get it out there. But the more you do that, everything is out there, the easier it is to move on. The other thing to kind of point to after something has broken trust in your relationship and you're working to repair the trust, is whoever broke it really is 100% responsible for apologizing and for fixing it. And I say fixing it in quotation marks because there isn't anything that you can go back and do to fix it or make it go away or make it not happen. But fix it being, I'm taking ownership. I'm taking accountability. I'm taking not only for my actions, but for the harm that I have done and that I have caused you. So in the ways that you can do that, it is 100% on the person who has done that, whether it be an addiction or stepping out on the relationship for some reason, or a smaller act of, I lost my temper or something like that. It is 100% your responsibility to fix it. Now you can ask for help in that when you see X, Y, or Z, or when you experience this, can you help me by whatever it is? Again, being very clear about what it is that you need, but it is your responsibility as the offending partner or the perpetrating partner. Both of those words are kind of harsh, but are what we're talking about here. It is your responsibility to mend it, to fix it, to make it better. And that may also mean making changes within yourself. So the third part is making sure that your partner feels understood. That, you can't just say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I know that I caused you hurt," but that you understand truly the hurt that you've caused that person. So yes, I'm 100% responsible for taking ownership and for apologizing, but I have to work to understand how my partner feels, to feel a sense of betrayal or to feel a sense of loss of trust in the relationship. It's incredibly important that that happens, because if the partner doesn't feel understood by you, oftentimes they feel like you don't get it, you don't understand, and then they get worried that you don't know the magnitude of whatever has happened has impacted them, and that you'll do it again. And it's also important for the perpetrating partner, or the person who is responsible for causing the harm. It also is important to help them feel understood, which is difficult because I don't understand why you made this decision. They may not understand it either, but working to understand it together and doing so in as non-judgmental way as possible, making sure that both partners feel heard and understood is an important part of the healing process when you're really trying to rebuild trust. Some things to think about too is the relationship. Trust in a relationship is only as strong as the sum of its parts, right? You've all heard that saying before, but each partner is bringing something to the table. And if I've got half a gallon and you've got a quarter of a gallon, we're not at a full gallon. Okay. So whatever it is that we need to do, we've got to figure out how do we get more milk in your gallon, right? So that together the sum of our parts is whole. And sometimes that means taking a reflective look on each individual as to maybe some things, that behavioral changes that I need to make, maybe increasing self-confidence or self-awareness, maybe decreasing shame, maybe being more optimistic. Those are all some just very short examples of things that I have seen that individuals within a relationship really need to focus on to be able to provide that safety and support and trust to their partner. And so looking at those things and being reflective on where are my weaknesses? Where can I improve? Where can I be better? Where can I do better? If you have a partner who you're saying, "Hey, this really isn't working for me," and they're saying like, "Well, I'm sorry, this is just how it is," you may consider speaking louder and really trying to help them see how that isn't working for you. Again, there might be some things that are non-negotiable for them, or things that may be reasons for you to end up getting divorced or separated. And that's okay. That is an okay reason to be separated, because you can't be with someone where I don't feel like I can really be myself, or I'm loved and respected and I matter. And I think, again, those being reflective in those moments and being able to really be aware of what I'm bringing to the table and how that's working or how that's not working for my partner, and the willingness to change if it's not working. Those things can be incredibly helpful for your partnership and creating trust in the relationship. So in this episode, we've talked about building trust, defining trust, how to build it, what that looks like, and how to repair it if it has been broken in your relationship. Hopefully this has been a helpful episode for you today on the Puzzle of Us podcast. Again, don't forget to subscribe. We've got lots of new things coming your way, and can't wait to see you on next week's episode. I'm your host, Chelsea Peterson, and we'll catch you next time.